The escalating war in the Middle East tonight, Israel and Iran, the death toll climbing on both sides.
Israel bombed nuclear targets in Iran on Thursday.
The U.S. attack on 3 Iranian nuclear sites.
It all started quietly enough, but by mid-June the situation had morphed into something far more combustible. Israel launched a sweeping wave of airstrikes across Iran around June 13th, targeting nuclear sites, missile storage facilities, and key IRGC installations. While they managed to hit several above-ground structures, the fortified core of places like Fordo, the one buried deep within a mountain, remained untouched. Iran responded with missile salvos and drone attacks aimed at Israel, firing hundreds in a sharp retaliation.
Missiles streaked over Tel Aviv Friday, with some Iranian projectiles breaching Israel's air defenses. At least 9 buildings were hit.
That's when things began to escalate. The U.S. started repositioning military assets at an unprecedented rate. The USS Carl Vinson was already hovering in the Arabian Sea, but suddenly the USS Nimitz, fresh from the South China Sea, was rerouted directly to the same region. In full force, it moved ahead of schedule, skipping scheduled port calls in Vietnam. At the same time, tankers, lots of them, KC-135s and KC-46s, were redeployed across the Atlantic and toward the Middle East to support sustained air operations. Then came the B-2 stealth bombers. Around June 21st, sources reported 6 of these planes flew from Missouri to Guam, fully loaded with GBU-57, mother of all bombs, the only ordnance capable of penetrating those hardened bunkers at Fordo. Analysts even hinted that they might shift closer to Iran from Diego Garcia. The stage was set for something dramatic, and dramatic it was.
The U.S. attack on 3 Iranian nuclear sites.
On June 22nd, the U.S. launched airstrikes on Iran's nuclear facilities at Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan. The White House officials later announcing that Fordo is gone. These weren't small, harassing strikes. They were aimed at crippling Iran's ability to enrich uranium deep underground. The bombs that did the work? Those massive GBU-57s, delivered by the B-52s, armed with bunker-busting capability. The U.S. made clear this was a calculated, targeted move, and President Trump described it as very successful. Meanwhile, the naval picture grew even more intense. The U.S. now had 2 carrier strike groups in play, USS Carl Vinson and USS Nimitz, with the USS Gerald R. Ford set to deploy to Europe and possibly swing into Middle Eastern waters too. These floating air bases, escorted by guided missile destroyers like the Arleigh Burke-class ships, were the backbone of a layered defense posture. Their mission? Provide missile interception, project air power, and deter Iran from lashing out. Navy vessels prowled near the Strait of Hormuz, the Gulf of Oman, and the wider region, ensuring maritime routes stayed open and secure. Iran hasn't been silent. Supreme Leader Khamenei warned of irreparable damage if the U.S. strikes continue, and Iran's military leaders made it clear U.S. bases Al-Assad, Al-Udeid, Bahrain's 5th Fleet HQ, are within reach. They've already signaled intent to retaliate with ballistic missiles and drones, and hinted at disrupting shipping through choke points like Hormuz and Bab al-Mandab. But just how big of a threat is Iran to the United States and her allies? Iran now possesses one of the largest and most diverse arsenals of ballistic missiles in the Middle East. These include everything from short-range rockets that can hit U.S. bases in Iraq to medium-range missiles capable of reaching Israel, U.S. fleets, and even parts of Europe. And while their accuracy and survivability used to be questions, both have improved significantly in recent years. That's part of what's spooking military planners today. One of the most recent and most worrying additions is the Qassam Basir Medium-Range Ballistic Missile, or MRBM, unveiled earlier this year. It reportedly has a range of about 1,200 kilometers and uses a maneuverable re-entry vehicle, which makes it harder to shoot down with U.S. missile defense systems like the Aegis aboard destroyers or the THAAD and Patriot systems stationed on land. The Basir also has a relatively short launch to impact time, meaning once it's fired, forces in the region have only minutes to respond, if that. What makes this even more dangerous is that it's road mobile, meaning it can be launched from hidden or rural areas then disappear before U.S. satellites can even confirm its origin point. Then there's the older but still very lethal Shahab series, particularly the Shahab 3, with a 2,000-kilometer range, putting Israel and even parts of southeastern Europe within reach. While it's based on North Korea's Nodong missile, Iran has heavily modified it over the years, reportedly increasing both its range and accuracy. These missiles are primarily liquid-fueled, which takes more time to prepare for launch, but newer variants may be able to launch more quickly. Iran also has the Fateh 110 and its variants like the Fateh 313, and these are solid-fueled short-range ballistic missiles, or SRBMs, meaning that they can launch much faster and require less logistical prep. They've been used in attacks on ISIS targets in Syria and U.S. bases in Iraq, most notably in the January 2020 missile barrage on Al-Assad Air Base after Qasem Soleimani's killing. That strike damaged structures and gave over 100 U.S. personnel traumatic brain injuries, showing that Iran's missiles aren't just for show. But it's not just about range. Iran has been working hard to improve the precision of its missiles. The old stereotype of Iranian missiles being good only for terror and bad aim is outdated. Satellite images and battlefield damage assessments from recent years suggest that their circular error problem, or CEP, the radius within which a missile is statistically likely to land, has shrunk. That means they're hitting closer to what they aim for. Combine that with the fact that they often fire in volleys, 10, 20, or even 50 missiles in a single strike, and it becomes a serious threat to air bases, shipyards, and even moving targets like aircraft carriers if they can coordinate intelligence well enough. And we can't forget Iran's massive drone fleet. While not technically missiles, they do play a similar role in terms of standoff attacks and saturation strikes. Iran has supplied drones to Hezbollah, the Houthis, and militias in Iraq and Syria. The Shahed 136, for instance, is a loitering munition, commonly called a kamikaze drone. It's cheap, effective, and hard to spot on radar due to its small size and wooden components. These have been used to hit oil facilities in Saudi Arabia and have appeared in the Russia-Ukraine war, supplied by Iran to the Kremlin. In a full-blown conflict, Iran wouldn't just rely on a couple of missile launches. It would likely try to saturate missile defense systems by launching a mix of ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and drones all at once. Even advanced Aegis-equipped destroyers or Israel's Iron Dome and David Sling systems can be overwhelmed by a massive barrage. The strategy is to fire so many projectiles from so many directions, and with such mixed flight paths, some will inevitably get through. This is why U.S. carrier strike groups are now so vital. They provide layers of defense, radar, early warning aircraft, and interceptors that can help shield Israel or allied bases. But even the best systems can be cracked with enough pressure. The deeper worry here is whether Iran would escalate to using missiles against population centers. So far, it has mostly targeted military infrastructure and symbolic assets. But if its command centers are destroyed, say in another B-2 raid, or if U.S. or Israeli forces strike deeper into Tehran, the calculation could change. Iran might feel it has nothing left to lose and go all out, launching dozens of missiles into cities like Haifa or Tel Aviv. That kind of mass casualty attack would almost certainly trigger overwhelming retaliation, possibly with airstrikes on Iranian leadership targets or infrastructure that takes the country offline for weeks. It's also worth noting that Iran's missile program is closely tied to its nuclear ambition. A missile is only as strategic as the warhead it can carry. And while Iran insists its nuclear program is peaceful, much of the international concern has centered on its development of missile systems capable of carrying a nuclear payload. The US and Israel view Iran's improved delivery vehicles, particularly those like the Qassam Basir, as a red line. A missile that can accurately deliver a nuclear warhead to Tel Aviv or a US base is a whole different kind of threat than one that just randomly hits a desert. So while the world is rightly focused on enrichment facilities like Fordow and Natanz, the other side of the equation, how the warhead would be delivered, is equally as dangerous, and it's growing more sophisticated every year. So where do things go from here? On one hand, the US may stick with airstrikes, targeting any remaining nuclear or missile facilities, while the Navy continues to hold Iran at bay and protect the fleets. On another path, Iran might escalate through maritime harassment, using speedboats, mines, missiles, to challenge U.S. control of critical sea lanes. Or it could hit back via proxy groups across Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen, dragging the region deeper into a complicated web of conflict. What is clear is this. We've moved from the shadow war to an open confrontation. With a lethal air campaign underway, the risk of further escalation is real. And unless cooler heads intervene and fast, we could see this spiral further into a new form of regional conflict. What does the future hold for Iran and the conflict unfolding? Dive deeper into our channel to take a detailed look at how the U.S. Navy can respond. Click the next video to learn more and to support our mission.